Hey everybody, welcome back. It is the Razzball Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am Beaton, joined by the Fantasy Master Lothario, the non-mustachioed man of mystery, Gray Albright. How's it going over there, Gray?
No, thanks for having me on, Beat on.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's weird, the non-mustachioed man of mystery is a new guest to the show. We've never seen that. So,
Well, I'll be
it's
honest about the mustache. I decided, as people heard in the decided to shave, a little mix it up a little bit, try something different. And now I realize that I might be too lazy to shave often. We'll see how it goes, but it's like every morning I'm like, this is exhausting, man. You know who really ruined it for everyone? Hitler. Hitler, like, he totally ruined it for people because, like, that part of the lip is such a pain in the ass to shave that he ruined it. Like, you can't grow that. You can't grow the Hitler. You just can't.
no, you definitely cannot do that particular style. Gray, I'm sorry that you have to deal with that. I mean, I use an electric razor most days, so like it's really not that big of a pain.
Oh, it's a
Um,
pain.
but I'm
It's a
also like, I also don't have the ability to really grow facial hair, so I
Hey,
have no choice.
hey, hey, Beadon, are you in the pockets of big shaving? are you
I
are
hate
you in the
kickbacks,
pocket?
man.
Are you in the pockets of Big Razor?
Asians
It's
are
a
really the
pain.
prime market. I mean, we have so much body hair going on. We're definitely the prime market. No, I'm getting no
Uh,
kickbacks, unfortunately. Unless they want to. We're happy to promote them, sponsor them, send me free products. I mean, electric razors aren't cheap, Gray.
I'm gonna be yeah. I'll be heading I'll be doing a seminar this weekend at the Tolerance Museum in Los Angeles where I discuss it's the Jewish Holocaust Museum where I talk about Hitler was terrible, but also the mustache really ruined it for me. that's the that's the real takeaway.
Like you really wouldn't rock that, right? Like that's like the anti unibrow. Like you moved it from like here down to like your lip.
I'm not saying it was ever it may never have been a good look,
It
but
was never
no one can even try it. Because if you try it,
fine.
people
This is
are
as
like,
a society. This is fine that we lost this, Gray. There are a lot worse things we've lost, culturally to different things. This is not even near the top of the list.
yeah,
I don't know what is at the top, but this isn't it.
that's probably fair. Okay, all right. So
Move
first
on
baseman.
from this topic before anything happens and we get flagged by some kind of censor program that's reading our
Wait,
podcast.
what
Uh,
happened? We're getting demonetized by YouTube. What happened? Actually, we might actually get more viewers by talking. Logarithm is accurate.
let's
Anyway,
let's not find out, Gray. Let's move on to baseball. It's already gonna be a long podcast. No reason to drag it out for an extra 20 minutes for us talking facial hairstyles. Let's get into it. It's gonna be first baseman this week. 1 through 3, we've already talked about in the top 20. If you haven't listened to that podcast yet, I don't have fond things to say about your number one, which is Bryce Harper. Number two, Freddie Freeman. He's just defying the laws of age and everything we've known from the beginning of time. And Matt Olson, like he's amazing, but did he have a career year? Nothing really to add on those guys. I'll let you
go
talk
back.
once
Go
I
back to
introduce.
the top 20. Yeah, go back to the top 20 and find out.
Yeah, number four
Okay.
is number four is a new tier for you, hence not being in the top 20. Pete Alonso at 4. Last year he had 46 home runs, 4 stolen bases, 92 runs, 118 RBIs, and a 217 average. Average really bottomed out last year on him. You have him projected for 46 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 92, 112, and a 251 average. Last year the BABIP was 205, which is drastically lower than it's ever been for him. He's certainly not fast, but he hits the ball hard enough where he's had much better BABIP than that in the past. Is that where the average is going for you? You're definitely giving it back to him this year.
Yeah, no, I think if you look at his numbers, he hits the ball so extraordinarily hard. As you mentioned, his max exit velocity was 115.7. He's always in like the top 1 to 3% of the league when it comes to exit velocity. Yes, he's not fast, so he's not necessarily going to have a insane BABIP, but he should have like around a 275 BABIP because of how hard he hits the ball. And if he has a 275 BABIP, that's going to get his average up to about 250. So yeah, I assume, and also like his strikeouts went up a little bit last year, but I always think like a small movement in strikeouts doesn't really worry me for a guy who's been in the league for a few years, because it's like if he was hitting the ball hard and having a bad BABIP, i.e. the fielders were catching the ball and he was being unlucky, then he might have stretched his strike zone a little bit and was pressing, which, compounded the issues and made his strikeouts go up a little bit. And then his BABIP was low, so his average is down now because of him, stretching the strike zone and also with the BABIP. So it's like, one thing leads to another, and suddenly he's hitting 215 or 217 last year. But I don't like, he's a career 251 hitter. That sounds about right. Like, he's still in the prime of his career. There's no reason why his average can't bounce back. And also, by hitting 251, by projecting 251, that means there's margin of error there where, he could be a 260, 270 hitter with the opposite luck, good fortune this year versus what he had last year. So, yeah, and he's got, huge power. He's basically Matt Alonso coming off of his worst year, and Matt Alonso's coming off his career year. So, Matt Alonso, he's just call them Matt Alonso. That's who they are. I think Matt Olson and Pete Alonso are basically the same thing. It's just one guy's coming off a career year and one guy's coming off of his, career worst year. But it doesn't mean they're really that different. They're essentially the same. And, I mentioned in the rankings post how, like, this is a new tier, but all these guys were in conversation for being in the top 20. So even though Matt Olson is, above Pete Alonso, they're really not that different.
Yeah, they're very similar. If you want to wait and get Alonso a few picks later, not that big a deal. I feel safer with the Braves offense. I think maybe that's the biggest difference between them, but the Mets aren't terrible at the top end either. So in general, you're fine for either one on that side. Number 5 is Nolan Jones. Last year in 106 games, he went 20-20, 60 and 62, and then hit 297. You have him projected for 29 home runs, 25 stolen bases, 83, 91, and a 261 average. He looked really nice last year. Barrel rate was number 17 among hitters with 200 barrel or batted events. Average exit velocity, all hard hit was all solid. Nothing in the numbers really says this was a fluke, right?
Yeah, no, completely. I'm all in on Nolan Jones. Unlike we'll get to him in I believe the shortstops, but unlike another guy like Ellie De La Cruz, who came up last year, Nolan Jones, I'm fine with Nolan Jones. I'm not as fine with Ellie, but that'll be we'll save that, I think, for shortstops. Anyway, with Nolan Jones, I think, it's interesting. There's so many things that Nolan Jones had discussed. One thing that I'm really kind of puzzled about is like, I should have asked Rudy, because like if you look at Steamer projections, they have him losing steals as and he's still, I mean, he just came up, so he's obviously young. And he's, I mean, I wouldn't say he's necessarily a speed demon, but he just stole 20 bags in 106 games, and Steamer has him losing steals for next year, which I just don't get it. I don't know. It's just so puzzling. I almost wonder if they're weighting minor league play so much more. I don't know. Anyway, his BABIP is another interesting facet to his profile, because last year he had a 401 BABIP. Obviously, that's high. Like, you can't expect anyone to get that high of a BABIP. But he's also in Coors for his home games, which is a notoriously good park for BABIP. So that should help buoy his buoy his BABIP, buoy the BABIP. That should help keep his BABIP afloat for like 2024 with, maybe, I wouldn't say like 401 obviously is high, but still, like if he's a 350 BABIP guy, that's still getting his average to around 265, 270, which is totally fine. I mean, that's above the major league average. And then like everything else, like I already mentioned the steals because of with Steamer. But so even if you were just to give him a repeat of his 20 steals from last year and a modest boost on power, this is below where I have him projected. But even if you were to say he's a 25, 20, 270 hitter, that sounds wonderful to me. It sounds good, and that's all. I think the floor. So you're talking about a guy who has great upside too. So there could, I mean, honestly, like you already mentioned my projections, but I think like I think a year from like Nolan Jones that we used to get from, prime Goldie, like a 35, 20, 280 year. It's not my projections, but I think those are all within the realm of possibility. So yeah, I'm really in on Nolan Jones.
Yeah, I mean, the consistency was there. He had 289 in 36 games in the first half with 5-5. He had 301 in 69 games in the second half, going 15 to 15. Like I said, everything looks good. He hits the ball hard. He's got a favorable ballpark to be hitting in half of his games. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm in on Nolan Jones. I've seen him get reached for maybe a little bit more than I'm willing to, but I get it. I would have no problem, taking the gamble. And if it in the draft season comes around and I'm still without any shares, I might be taking that risk too, just to see how it goes. Number 6 is Cody Bellinger. He's currently a free agent as we're recording this. It's January 19th, the day after both of our birthdays. 26, 20 last year, 95, 97, and hit 307. Got the launch angle back under control, back in line with the 2017 to 2020 seasons. Where are you at on Cody Bellinger? Obviously, we're waiting to see where he signs to determine some of the, lineup, ballpark factors, that kind of thing. But in general, where are you at on Bellinger?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. All indications are that he's probably going to re-sign with the Cubs. As I say that, he as you mentioned, he hasn't signed yet, and as I say that, that's probably going to make me look like an idiot, but it seems to be headed that way. I don't really think park factors are going to, change his profile much. So wherever he signs, it's not. I don't think it's really going to matter. Like if he goes to Baltimore, which he's absolutely not going to, I would be, a little bit worried because of the Baltimore, because of Camden. But that's never happening. If he goes to the Red Sox, then like that could change things. If he goes to Coors, that could change things. But he's not going to those places. Like those are not even they're not even in the possibilities for where he's going to sign. I don't think. Like the Red Sox have, Casas, and the Rockies don't do anything. Anyway, so wherever he signs within the realm of possibility of him potentially signing, those like handful of teams where I could see him going, I don't think any of those are going to really like affect him. So with that said, last year proved to, I think, everyone that he was able to heal his shoulder finally. I'm not like, I was out last year. I'll be, totally honest. I was worried that it would be a career defining injury for his shoulder. And would have waited for it to happen too on a celebration on a home run. Jesus. Kendrys Morales even shudders at that. But anyway, Cody Bellinger, I think, is basically what last year was a sign that his power is back. So that's good. I think, you could probably put him in for roughly 27 to 30 homers. I think his steals he's always surprisingly good on the base paths when it comes to steals. So, at least 15 steals, probably closer to 20. And his average, like last year, it showed like his shoulder was better. So it showed like his eye returned actually. So that goes back to what I was saying with Pete Alonso, like with the, with the K's going up for Alonso. It shows with like Bellinger that he was feeling healthy and his strikeouts went way down again to previous years of like, when he was really good. And it shows you it happened because like he wasn't pressing. He wasn't stretching the strike zone and he was waiting for his pitch. And everything came back in like such a dramatic way for him. And I don't see any reason why that shouldn't continue now. I think he's fine. Until, maybe his early 30s and he starts declining again. But right now, he's 28 years old. I have no problem with Cody Bellinger drafting him at, in the top. I want to say I have him like in the top 30 or 40 overall. I have no problem drafting Cody Bellinger. I like him. I think he's, so roughly, I haven't projected him yet because he's still a free agent, but I'd say roughly 27 homers, 18 to 20 steals, 285 plus average. Good counting stats depending on where he goes, and he'll probably go somewhere that has a good lineup because if they're signing him to a deal, that means they're a competitive ball club. So yeah, I like Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, I also assume he's going back to the Cubs just because they're, kind of pressed into spending money since they haven't spent any money. I I don't know. I agree. Like he definitely looked better last year, and so it's kind of a tale of like two different things. His eye return, like he had the best career pay rate, swing and strike rate, whiff rate, all those, all career bests. However, he also had career lows in hard hit rate, average exit velocity, in barrels. Like it wasn't, a terrible where it dropped out and it looked completely different, but they were all low for what he does. So it just has me slightly concerned about Bellinger. I pretty much have him in the same spot in the rankings you do. So for I not saying anything against where you have him. I'm looking at him and considering dropping him because it does worm me some. And we've seen Bellinger lose it once already in his
I got
career.
to. I got a question for you, Mister Don. Is Bellinger above or below Vlad? Vlad Jr. is my next one. But is Bellinger below or above Vlad Jr. for you?
I have him above Vlad Jr. So like I said, I have him in the same,
Oh,
almost in the same spot. I just Like, I don't know. I keep talking, myself in circles about whether I need to drop him.
That's unfortunate. Because if you said below Vlad Jr., I was about to give you some, but if you have him in the same spot as me, then
No, I think we're literally in the same spot. Like, it's
yeah, I got nothing to give them.
okay.
I was about to take the gloves off. I was about to raise the dukes, as they say.
Nope. You already mentioned him. Let's move on to number 7, which is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Last year, he had 26 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 78, 94, hit 264. Projected for 30 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 90, 98, and 272. The Blue Jays in general kind of didn't have the offensive output that maybe we thought they would. And Vlad didn't really put up big power numbers. The average dropped. Like, it wasn't a great year for him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. So since I already had my dukes up and I was ready to fight instead of you, I will fight the average draft person, ADP, as it were. I will attack them, the person who is drafting Vlad Jr. in front of Cody Bellinger at ADP, drafting him 20 spots above Cody Bellinger, by the way. So if you were to take Cody Bellinger's line for what I said, which was a generic team that he signs with, 27 homers, 18 steals, 280. If you were to take that line and compare it to the line for Vlad Jr., it's much better than Vlad Jr.'s line. I can't imagine how it could be worse. Vlad Jr.'s not stealing 18 bags. I'll tell you that. I've watched Vlad Jr. a few times on the base paths. He's not stealing 18 bags. Could he hit for a higher average? I guess, but his career average is 279. That's Vlad Jr., that is. Could he hit for more homers? I suppose, but the only time Vlad Jr.'s hit for more homers is when the Blue Jays were playing in a minor league park. He doesn't hit for power like that. I mean, even last year, his launch angle went up, and he tried to hit for more power, I believe, but then that hurt his average, and it ended up leaving you at a mark of 26 homers and a 264 average. I don't know, man. I like Vlad Jr. if he were, at the right spot in the draft. I would take him. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm willing to draft Vlad Jr., but I think I'm lower than most people because, like, unless Vlad Jr. gets 130 RBIs and 110 runs and hits 300 plus, I don't see how his power and his steals get you to a place where his price is in drafts. Am I crazy, or do you agree, Mr. Don?
Unfortunately for all the listeners, I agree. So I don't really have a lot to say here. I believe he's probably being taken 10 to 15 spots in some cases earlier than I'm willing to take him. In a points league, this all changes because he walks a ton, he doesn't strike out, all that adds up differently in a points league. But for Roto, which is generally that's what we're talking about here when we're going through our rankings. Yeah, I don't see myself ending up with him. I'm considering actually dropping him below the couple of guys that we're going to talk about, coming up here, just because I just wonder, are we chasing like something that's not going to happen, or that happened because, as you mentioned, he was playing in minor league ballparks. Now, in that season, I believe he hit similar home runs home and away. So, like, there's a case to be made that he has that capability, but he hasn't shown it since that year. That was also the bouncy ball year, or one of the big bouncy ball years. So you add all that up, unless we're going back to those baseballs, I don't know where the 40 plus home runs come from. And you're right. Like, he needs a high average and he needs a ton of counting stats, which is kind of my argument against a lot of the guys, that are sitting in this range, at least as far as taking them early, and the overall is you kind of need the rest of the team to support some of what they're doing.
Yeah. Word.
All right, let's move on to your next tier. Number 8, Paul Goldschmidt. Last year, he went 25 home runs, 11 stolen bases, 89-80, and hit 268. You have him projected for 27 home runs, 10 stolen bases, 88-94, and a 262 average. Launch angle was down a little bit last year versus a couple, last couple seasons, but most of the other numbers kind of look in line with what he's been doing. Is this age? Is this just a launch angle? Where are you at?
Yeah, no, I think Goldschmidt for me, I mean, he reminds me a lot of like Freddie Freeman in that like he's like they're like the Matthew McConaughey and from they're like everyone else gets older and they stay the same age. It's yeah. I don't know. I see Goldschmidt. I'm like he should get older and not be as good, but he just seems to get older and stay the same. I don't really know. I would imagine at some point he falls off a cliff, but at this point it hasn't really happened. Not completely, at least. Am I confident in drafting him? Yeah, I mean, I would probably, based on the price at least, if the price is okay. And right now he's going at like 80 overall. I don't think, I don't think I'd necessarily get that excited about drafting him, but I would do it if he were there at like 80 overall. He's fine. I don't know. I honestly, it's like hard to be excited about him. I think he's good. I think he's been great, obviously, for many years. Now, I don't know. He's just sort of he's Paul Goldschmidt at this point, right? I mean, he's just like he is what he is, I think, until he no longer is that. And if you're just going along, it's kind of like what we were talking about with Freeman. Like if you're just going along and plucking guys like Paul Goldschmidt and saying like, "Oh, he's going to fall off a cliff this year." It's like you're just guessing. I mean, there's nothing really to support that. I mean, his BABIP came down a little bit, so you can look at like the aging curve on players, and his ground balls were up a little bit, and his fly balls were down a little, but nothing really like dramatically. Like his line drives still look fine. He had a better hard contact than last year than he did even the year before. Like nothing is really like in his profile. He kind of looks like if he were to go out this year and have 27 homer, 12 steal season, hitting 270, which is what all the projections basically say. I mean, would it shock? I mean, that's what he does every year. It's like until he's no longer doing it, I guess he's gonna do it.
Yeah, and part of just the drop in his overall value is this is the first time he's played 150 games and hasn't gotten to 90 plus runs or RBIs. Like his counting numbers were down across the board because the Cardinals were down across the board. I guess some of it is, do you believe in the Cardinals offense to rebound, or was last year kind of part of the Cardinals maybe needing to look at the core of their roster and make some changes? Maybe that's a different discussion, but I think to some extent, like we were talking, I mean, like what it's going to come down to with a lot of first basemen, because we're not talking about a lot of steals. Goldschmidt has been a guy who has stolen in the past, but he put up 11 last year, even with the running base rules. I feel like that's what he's gonna do. The only reason he was able to do 11 was because of the running base or the base running rules. So I mean, he like you said, he is what he is. I think the counting numbers could bounce back as the Cardinals get things together. And if it doesn't, he could also get traded because he's about to be a free agent. So he could potentially land in a better offense if the Cardinals do suck again.
Yeah, agreed.
Moving on to number 9, a guy that I feel like I always have him ranked too highly in my initial run and have to kind of dial it back, but it paid off last year. I'm looking for it to pay off again this year. And number 9, Christian Walker. Last year he went 33 home runs, 11 stolen bases, 86, 103, and hit 258. We have him projected for 30 home runs, 7 stolen bases, 81, 95, and 251. And because I mentioned it with Goldschmidt, I'll just mention it up front with Walker. He is also unrestricted free agent next year. So if Arizona's season doesn't go and they don't build on last year, he could potentially get moved as well.
Yeah, no, I think so. But I mean, I feel like he's probably not moving. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Yeah, no, I think with him, his steals were up, which was, surprising. His steals went from like 2 to 11. And yeah, even I guess in 2019 he stole 8, but that was obviously a while ago, 4 years ago. So yeah, I don't know. I think with Christian Walker, I'm probably underestimating his value a little bit with my draft spot. Like you're saying, you might be overestimating. I might be under a little bit. Like honestly, like it's like you look at certain guys like Christian Walker. You look at him, and you take away his name and you take away Vlad Jr.'s name, and you just look at their numbers, and you're like, why would Vlad Jr. be going so far ahead of Christian Walker? I mean, even the projections that aren't ours, even like even if we take us out of the equation, you just look at the projections. Like Christian Walker's projections look basically the same as Vlad, and he's going like 60 picks later. So, yeah, I mean, Christian Walker just seems like he just doesn't get much respect, and like for like people just maybe because he's a late bloomer, so people don't really trust it as much as some other guys. They figure Vlad Jr. because he's only like I think he's 24 or something. People figure there's a lot of upside there. With Christian Walker, it's like he was a late bloomer, and now he's already 32, going to be 33 to start the year. How much more is there? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's fair, but the price difference in drafts is so dramatic that it's like, why would you ever take Vlad Jr. and not take Christian Walker?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm with you. I had to move him down because where I had him ranked, I couldn't put that out in the world and have people be drafting him there when you don't have to. Like even where I have him now is it's like rounds earlier than you have to draft Christian Walker, but like that's where I believe he should be going. So I'm sticking to my guns and I'm having him up there because I believe in everything he did. He hits the ball hard. I mean, everything in his profile looks good, and maybe the age 33 thing is maybe an indicator that it could be going in the opposite direction at some point. But I think to some extent, like the age curves, like we have to re-examine them based on what like fitness level is and technology is now versus, I mean, even 20 years ago.
I think that's a good point because I don't know if maybe I just haven't heard about it, but I don't think I don't think there's been any adjustment to like aging curves recently. Like people just assume like, a younger is better for the most part, but like you look at guys like I mean, this isn't even hitters anymore, but you look at guys like Verlander, Scherzer, like Charlie Morton. It's like some of the guys who are like the most reliable are like late 30s when it comes to pitching. It's like I don't know. Like it doesn't feel like maybe it's not like maybe 27 is no longer the new 21, something like that. I don't know. I'm still formulating it in my head.
Almost feels like 27 is like the dead area where like everything might go bad and they'll get it back together for their old. Like you get big pop
Yeah.
right off the bat when they're young and they just like they have the
Oh,
energy to play every day, and then you get a little bit of decline. Then like as they are partying too much in their mid to late 20s. And then you get like the serious, like older 20s or late 30s or late
Yeah, but
20s, early
we were
30s
just
people.
mentioning with like if you look at like this, the podcast itself that we're actually the one we're actually in right now, this podcast that we're inside of. If you look at the guys' ages for that we've already mentioned, even like Bryce Harper, Freddie Freeman, Matt Olson, Pete Alonso came up old. Vlad's younger. Paul Goldschmidt is not. Christian Walker is not. Like the names we've already mentioned are not even like that young, really. I mean, Nolan Jones is I think 26. Bellinger's like 28. I think 28,
Yeah.
29.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it's okay.
Yeah. It is. It's just it's possibly a different era. Maybe something Rudy can explain to us, as I'm sure it's factored into his projections more so than us just looking at our projections. Moving on to the next tier, and you mentioned some of the age, and we're going to go a little bit younger here in this tier, starting with our boy Spencer Steer.
Oh my
Last
god, I
year,
love them. Oh, sorry, I love them
uh,
though. Go ahead,
I,
go ahead.
I,
Go.
I was just going to let you go. I mean, we don't. I don't have to read the numbers.
No, no,
People
no,
can
no,
always
no,
go look
no,
those
no, no,
up.
no, 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 no. Go ahead, go ahead, do it. I love them though, but go ahead.
Right. 23 home runs, 15 stolen bases, 74, 86, 271 last year. You have him projected for 25, 17, 81, 88, 266 this year. All the underlying numbers are strong, not like elite, but like at a level of like you're not concerned about that at all. I mean, 23, 15, first look gray, Spencer Steer.
Mm, I love them. Oh my god, love, 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 love. Yeah. So I think with so Spencer Steer. So here's there's a few things. So a I don't know why he's going so late in drafts. That's one. That's one thing. I'm really not sure what's going on with it. It might be just early drafts. Like we've talked about ADP before. ADPs you should not pay attention to it. Even though we talk about a lot, you shouldn't pay attention to it. But if you're like, if you're drafting guys in October and that becomes the early ADP and that gets set in stone and then it just gets calloused over and now you have an ADP that doesn't make any sense. Like if you look at Spencer Steer's numbers, even if you were like just to take his last year, 23 homers, 15 steals, 271 as a rookie, like, well, it wasn't necessarily rookie, but it was his first full year playing. Like, you look at those, you hear those numbers, and he's in a great park, in a solid lineup, and you're like, why would that be? Why would he not be able to do that again? Like, that sounds amazing. It sounds fantastic to me. A guy, a young, like, it's so interesting because like if you get some guys who are like who just come up and have a solid year and then they go on, and then the next year people will be so crazy about them. But then you have other players like a Spencer Steer who's like in a solid park, in a solid lineup, just 3 homer, 15 steal year, 271, and people are like, yeah, I don't know. Like, what? What? Like, why? I don't know. I don't understand it. To be honest, I don't. Because, like, even if you were to look at, like, the player rater from last year, he was 69th. Oh, hello, 69. He was 69th on the player rater last year. Like, just looking at that alone, he was above. Well, he was above Vlad Jr. He's actually above Bryce Harper too, but I don't want to get you started. I don't want to get you started on Bryce Harper, but he was above Vlad Jr. last year, and he was at 69 on the player rater, and now he's getting drafted at like 110 overall. It's like why would he get so much worse? Like what? Like He's got solid contact. He takes a walk. He played 156 games last year. So, I know the Reds lineup has a lot of mouths to feed with the Reds lineup, but David Bell played him for 156 games. Why would David Bell suddenly stop playing him? Like, if he's good and he plays him every day last year, he's an automatic, like, he's penciled into the lineup on opening day and doesn't come out unless he's injured. So he's a regular fixture in the Reds lineup, and he's got speed in a great park with good power, and he makes good contact, so he's going to hit for a good average. So even if he were to take a modest jump up in like his numbers and go to like 25, even if he were to go to like 25 homers and 15 steals and hit 270, that sounds better than Vlad Jr. He's got way more speed. I mean, it's maybe the counting stats might nudge Vlad Jr. up, but I mean, Spencer Steer sounds really good. Just if he repeats, that is not even him getting better. That's him just repeating. And honestly, I don't see why he wouldn't get better. I think he could get much better. So, yeah, I'm completely in on Spencer Steer. Also, I'm completely in on every Reds player except for Ellie De La Cruz. But that's another podcast. But I am so in on Spencer Steer. And also, the final thing I'll say about Steer, which goes back to what I was saying about Nolan Jones, I got to talk to Rudy because I don't know why Spencer Steer would go out his rookie year and steal 15 bags and then come back this year playing less games and steal only 8 bags. Like, what? Why would he lose speed? And it doesn't make any sense. It really, I don't know. I really got to talk to Rudy about that, though.
Yeah, I will say for my part, I think the counting numbers can really only go up. I feel like the Reds offense is just moving north. Like they're moving in a better direction. Whereas Toronto's, if we're just going to keep calling Vlad out here, they're moving maybe in the opposite direction where their offense doesn't look as good as it did, maybe a couple of years ago. So, I mean, if we're just looking at that direct comparison, there's that. And like he's basically Paul Goldschmidt if he doesn't take a step forward, and if he does, he's better. I mean, that's kind of how I'm looking at Spencer Steer. Maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic and saying that Goldschmidt's the floor. Maybe it's not the floor, but it's like it seems like what he should be giving you with no improvement. I will say he stole 8 stolen bases in 1 month, which definitely helps towards that 15 number. So I could see taking him down a couple,
But
but
that's even, but
I
that,
also don't
but
see
you
what
could even, not to interrupt, but you could say, oh, he had 1 month of 8 steals. That, that helped give him 15 on the year. But you can take that the other way and be like, if he can steal 8 in 1 month, he could steal 25 bags.
right. So it kind of depends on what the Reds are going to allow the middle of their lineup to do. I mean, that'll be interesting just to watch, in and of itself, because I think most of the players on that lineup can steal bags if they just let them. It's just it's not the way the Reds are going to play or not.
Right.
Moving on to number 11 is Triston Casas. Last year he had 24 home runs, no stolen bases, 66, 65, and hit 263. You have him projected for 31 home runs, 1 stolen base, 84, 88, and 266. Huge second half where he hit 317 with 15 home runs. I mean, he hits the ball plenty hard. It was kind of surprising how bad maybe he did early on based on everything that we expected from him. But if you waited, if you held on to him, it paid off.
Yeah, no, completely. He had I mean, like you mentioned, he had a great second half. I like Casas a lot. This whole tier of players, Steer, Casas, and the next guy. I like this tier a lot. I'm going to draft all these guys multiple times. I love Casas. The only drawback, I think Casas's power is, he's one of those rare guys that can hit for power and average. So it wouldn't shock me to see him put up like a 30-plus homer, 280 season, something in that range. Like he's really good. He, like you mentioned, 317 in the second half. I wouldn't be shocked even if he hit 300 on the year. Like he's got good power. So you're looking at a guy who's got great power, good speed. I mean, excuse me, great power, good average. The speed is going to be the issue. Like he's got no speed whatsoever. So, unfortunately for fantasy, that's going to hurt him. I could see, like, I am drafting him. I like him a lot. The one big drawback is that he's going to have to hit for power and hit for average to return this sort of value, because he's not going to be able to help you at all with steals to help his fantasy value. So even Vlad, as we mentioned, about 5,000 times in this podcast, even he gives a handful of steals. Even 5 to 7 steals helps a little bit from a first baseman. Like you have to go back to Pete Alonso and Matt Olson to get 0 steals and have like great value. But those guys are hitting like 50 homers and 260. So Casas really needs to hit. He needs to hit 275-ish and 30-ish homers. Like he needs to hit 270 and 30-ish homers in that range in order to make sure he has his fantasy value, because he's not getting it. He's not getting any of it from steals. So that's just something to keep in mind.
I mean, absolutely. When it's a complete goose egg in steals, it is a little bit different. I guess it depends on how you're building your team. I don't tend to mind it because I try to get my steals in big bunches. But if you're trying to build out steals, by piecemeal, those 5 to 10 definitely do matter. If you can't just take the straight up goose egg from a player. I really like Casas. Like I said, he hit the ball very well last year. 27th in barrel rate, 50th in hard hit, 49th in average exit velocity, and a minimum of 250 batted ball events. So pretty solid numbers across the board. There's no reason that the power and average can't be there. It's just kind of like, are you willing to take the gamble on it and see it or not? Moving on to the next guy is Josh Naylor. Last year in 121 games, he had 17 home runs, 10 stolen bases, 52 runs, 97 RBIs, and hit 308. You have him projected for 26 home runs, six stolen bases, 79, 102, and a 302 average. I mean, the average bump seems legit. The launch angle is moving up, which I believe has helped improve that average as well. I mean, Naylor looks good, Gray.
Yeah, no, completely. I wrote a sleeper post for Naylor, and I also I feel like he's another guy. Like this is gonna be a tough tier for me to get all the guys from, because it's like I can only draft so many first basemen. But this tier, and as we go along, we'll talk about it. Like first baseman dries up like at a certain point. Like it's not like it's insanely deep. But yeah, like Josh Naylor is another guy who I'm like, him, Spencer Steer, and Casas. I'm like, how can I get multiple shares? I love him. I think potentially like Josh Naylor feels to me like all he needs is to stay healthy, and he's gonna be like a star. I think probably, and likely the power may not be elite, but everything, like he looks like he could be 27 plus homer, 27 to 30 homers. Like I said, not elite on power, but 27 to 30 homers, and 12 to 15 steals, and a 290 plus average. So basically like a top 5 first baseman. He just needs to stay on the field, and health is like is one of those things where it's like a guy is injury prone until he's no longer injury prone, and then he's stays on the field all the time. Like I can think of plenty of guys who are like, oh, he can't stay on the field, and then suddenly he stayed on the field for seasons in a row. Like a big one that comes to mind is Nelson Cruz. For a long time, he was injury prone in his 20s, and then he played until he was like 50. So yeah, I like Josh Naylor. I think he's like totally underrated as far as his price goes. Like his ADP right now is 133. I would probably say he's around the top 100 guy for me. Like he's a good 30 picks above in my rankings, I think, than where he is at drafts. I would grab him everywhere. I love him.
Yeah, I think you might be slightly higher on Naylor than I am. But I can see where you're coming from. I don't believe the speed is going to sustain. I think if anything, this is, I didn't really understand where it's coming from with Steers stolen bases dropping, but I do it Naylor. Naylor's like this. He's legitimately slow. He doesn't have much speed. Maybe he can get a handful, just kind of the way that like Anthony Rizzo has always been able to steal a handful here and there. Who he used to have a little bit of speed, but now there's not many people who are slower than Anthony Rizzo at this point in his career. um, but like that's the only thing I have against Naylor. I think the average is legitimate. I think the power could even tick up if he continues to bump the launch angle up just a little bit. You don't want that to get crazy, but I do believe as hard as he hits the ball, there's more power in there to come out. Moving on to our next tier here, number 13, Anthony Santander. Last year he had 28 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 81, 95, and he hit 257. You have him projected for 29 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 76, 88, and a 247 average. He had his career best hard hit rate. And I mean, all the numbers looked great last year for Santander guy.
Yeah, no, completely. I think with Santander, I mean, he's obviously he's a switch hitter, so he's not going to be totally affected by Camden, but he'll be affected some. I like Santander. He feels to me like a guy who's usually pretty underrated. I think I don't think his whatchamacallit. I don't think his floor. I think his floor is fine. I don't think his upside is really maybe that's why people are a little bit underrating him. Like I don't think his upside is really that dramatically above where he's ever been in his career. Like he's essentially a 30 homer, 5 steal, 245 ish hitter. If anything, he probably has more downside because he hit I think he hit 224 batting average against off speed stuff. So I mean, there's enough bad pitchers in the league that throw terrible fastballs, so he should be fine. But a guy who potentially, I think his floor on his average might be a little bit lower than 245. So it could be like he could bottom out a little bit on average. I don't think not below 220 probably, but he might hit closer to 240 than 255. But it's fine. I mean, he's got good power. Like you mentioned, the hard hit rates and everything. Like he's solid. I just think he's probably underrated a little bit in drafts. I just don't think his upside might not be that dramatically great.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I feel like he's pretty safe for what he's going to give you, but expanding too much outside of what we've already seen may not quite happen. So that feels very fair. Um, I don't know what his contract status is, but I believe he's got to be coming up on free agency as well. So someone who could potentially move, and that could be big for him if he gets moved out of that ballpark. Yeah, he is going to be a free agent next year. So that could be a potential guy who is on the
Yeah,
move.
yeah, I could see actually that. I mean, that makes more sense to me than the Christian Walker thing. I could totally see Santander getting traded because, like, they don't need him really. I mean, he should be traded for an arm, probably. I don't, I'm not as invested in the Orioles' real baseball strategies, but I think it would make sense for them to move Santander. Absolutely.
So yeah, a guy who could possibly be, getting some potential ballpark help, if anything else. Number 14 is Christian Encarnacion-Strand. Our Reds love affair continues here. In 63 games last year, he had 13 home runs, two stolen bases, 29, 37. You have him projected for 26 home runs, three stolen bases, 68, 72, and a 259 average. Maybe the biggest question mark for Strand for me right now is where is he going to play?
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna lead with that because I feel like, uh, there's a lot of chatter about India getting moved. I think if Jonathan India gets traded, I feel much more confident with this. I could see getting to March and lowering my projections and ranking for CES because he just doesn't have the at bats that are going to be necessary. My thought is India gets traded, Strand is their DH for 150 plus games. If India is not moved, Strand may get under 275 at bats, and I will adjust my ranking and projections on him. So yeah, I like him a lot. Like I think like I might be being too aggressive with this and with his projections on at bats. I think if he gets 500 at bats, I'm 100% in. like, and I think you got to draft him. I think it's gonna happen. I think India is getting moved. Like it doesn't make any sense for them to go into the year with CES on the bench and India playing, or even a platoon of sorts because they're both righties. So that doesn't like none of this makes any sense for what they're doing right now. Like the Reds should have moved India in December, forget about in January. Like he should be way gone off of the team. So yeah, we'll see. Especially after they signed Heimer Candelario. So yeah, we'll see. I like CES, but yeah, his at bats are not set in stone at this point.
Or not, which is unfortunate. Not what you or I definitely wanted to see. There's a couple of fairly strong free agents still out there. So maybe just like roster construction wise, when they land, we'll see something done with some of the more obvious trade candidates like India. I mean, I guess it's possible they just go into the season with an extra strong bat on their bench that shouldn't be on their bench, but that just it feels like a bit of a waste for what the Reds are doing right now. But yeah, we'll wait and see. And we'll both have to adjust if Strand's going to be coming off the bench regularly.
Also, it wouldn't shock me if India and CES are both on the Reds going into the season and Bell flips it and CES is the starter at DH and India is more of a utility guy.
Yeah, I mean that could definitely happen as well. I don't really understand the Candelario signing, given that they had this roster construction in place. So I feel like they have to have some kind of move in mind.
It doesn't make any sense at all. So that's why I'm assuming that too, because otherwise, if they don't trade India, then that means the Reds signed Heimer Candelario for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean it really doesn't make sense to me otherwise. I don't understand it if not for that. Let's go ahead and move on from our just dumbfoundedness at that possibility. Um, Isaac Paredes comes at number 15. Last year had 31 home runs, one stolen base, 71, 98, 250. This year, you have projected for 33 home runs, one stolen base, 81, 92, and 262. You are buying the power bump, Gray.
Yeah, I am. And also, like he was 90 on the player rater last year, for what it's worth. But also, like unlike a lot of guys in the Rays lineup, Paredes plays. Like he's there. He got 100 and what is it 143 games last year. Like unless it's a really like late switch, because Kevin Cash, I mean, obviously platoons everyone, so it's hard to like rely on at bats. So that's why I'm even, Oh, hello. Sorry, I don't. Was that my computer? I don't know. Anyway, Paredes, is the reason why I'm even mentioning at bats so much is because I feel like that that is the reason why Paredes could potentially be getting a lower ADP and drafted later because people don't necessarily buy the at bats. Maybe the power, if they're not buying that, I don't know what to tell people. I feel like his homer per fly ball at 17%, like that's basically 2 years in a row he's done that. So like the fact that like his launch angle is kind of absurd, but he hits for power. Like that's kind of what he does. Like he does like he's not like he doesn't have great speed, don't get me wrong. Like he's not a five-tool player, but he does have solid power and he also hits for a good average. Like he hits the ball hard. So I see him basically as like, a poor man's Triston Casas or something. Like or we've mentioned this guy a few times in this podcast. I'm just going to say it. He's basically Vlad Jr. 150 picks later.
Yeah, I definitely see a few differences in the profiles, but I mean, it's not egregious though. Like you're talking about 31 home runs, 250. Yeah, Vlad has a lot more upside for maybe both of those numbers, but at least just taking them at face value for what they did last year. I mean, I think Paredes was. I don't have the player right in front of me, but I want to say if he wasn't ahead of Vlad, it was pretty close in regards to their overall value last year. So I mean, I don't know if it's because of the Rays, because of playing time, because of the buying into the power. I'm not exactly sure why he drops as far as he does, but it does feel like he's a bit of a value pick. Maybe it's just kind of the utility infielderness of him, where if you don't have one set position all the time, people kind of get scared. But I think that in an organization like the Rays, I feel like that helps him stay in the lineup because even if there's a player one position that's better than him, he can move over and be better than whoever's there currently, probably. Moving on to number 16 is Luis Arraez. Last year, he had 10 home runs, three stolen bases, 71, 69, hit 354. You have projected for eight home runs, three stolen bases, 74, 62, and a 333 average. I mean, if you want a high average, this is your guy.
Yep. That's
Uh,
it. That's it. Yeah. If you need average, it's a nice thing to have, I guess, on some fantasy teams. Like if you're hurting, like if you've drafted, Pete Alonso and I don't know, other players
I'm
that give
trying
you
to
that
think of
average.
guys at the top end that hit for bad
Yeah,
averages anymore. I mean,
yeah.
we kind of went through that phase for a little while, but a lot of the guys up there are like, I mean, I'd say like 270, but that's not bad.
Yeah, no, I know. It's true. I guess Yeah, another guy who I've mentioned a lot, even though he's not a first baseman, Ellie De La Cruz. I guess
Lay off my boy Ellie, okay?
if you have, I guess
We're saving him.
okay, we'll save him for shortstops. But if you have Pete Alonso and Ellie De La Cruz, and you're worried that your team might hit 220, I mean, I guess Arraez isn't a bad option. He's not the type of guy I draft, but this would be around where I would go for him if I felt like I needed average, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, team build dependent. Although I feel like if you're just chasing some average, there's some guys we're going to talk about later that can give you, maybe not lead the league in average, but good average and at least some more upside than maybe a raise is giving. But it feels so safe to get average there if that's what you need in your build. I completely understand it, and he does have value based on what the player rater said, at least to some extent. Number 17 was Sal Perez, who we talked about in the Catchers podcast previously. Number 18 is Alec Bohm. Last year had 20 home runs, 4 stolen bases, 74, 97, and a 274 average. You have him projected for 22 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 83, 91, and a 282 average. This is just the most boring first baseman in all the land.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
He doesn't really do anything well. He does everything just good enough to get this ranking.
he's it's funny because he's boring, but his last name doesn't sound boring at all. It's like bomb. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's essentially like he's not a huge power guy, not a big speed guy, has good average, should hit in the middle of the Phillies lineup, which is good. Yeah, I mean he is kind of boring. I don't know. I mean his homer per fly ball feels it feels doable for him. Like even it's low and his contact. He makes good contact. Like I don't know. I mean he did like he per fly ball like last year was 12%. I mean if he can maybe tweak his launch angle a little bit more, like last year his launch angle was up a little bit. If he can get his launch angle up just a hair more and hit more fly balls, he is in a good place. Like Phillies, righties in Philly, like he could hit 25 homers there, and he's never gonna hit. Well, I shouldn't say never, but he's a solid bet for a 280 average. So 25 homers and a 280 average. If it's there, I mean, I didn't, as you already mentioned, my projections. Like I don't have them there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not projecting for 25 homers, but if he can get a little bit more power and hit for the average that he usually hits for, I mean, I could see him being decent. I do think his upside feels a little bit lower than some of the other guys we've mentioned, so he is a little bit on the boring side, but yeah, I mean, I could see him being valuable in a corner man type way.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's like he's Brian Reynolds of first base. He's just super boring. He's going to give you what he's going to give you, and you know that. So if you can get him at that value in the draft, sure, take it and know you're going to get your draft value out of it. But that's pretty much all I would expect from him. And I am at least a little bit concerned given, we saw Bryson Stott really break through last year. Muto's still sitting behind him in the lineup. Like we potentially see him slide a couple of spots in the lineup if he doesn't really build off of last year at all. So I am a little bit concerned that the counting stats aren't necessarily as guaranteed as they maybe should be for him if he was in a different lineup. On to the next tier, which is 19. Yandy Diaz comes at 22 home runs. No stolen bases, 95, 78, and a 330 average last year. You're projected for 18 home runs, one stolen base, 80, 71, and 308. Yeah, I mean, the Yandy Diaz looked like he was going to take the power step forward a little bit last year, and then he didn't again.
Well, he did versus his previous years. I mean, it was a little
For like
bit,
a little while, he did, and
yeah,
then it stopped.
yeah. I don't have his monthly launch angles in front of me, but I'm assuming his launch angle was better in the first half when he was hitting for power. Yeah, I mean, this is sort of what I'm talking about with like first baseman isn't as deep as maybe you think. Like Yandy could be okay. He will hit for a good average. Like you'll give him that. He may really, I mean, he may revert to like a 15 homer, 0 steals, 300 hitter, which is it's not great. It's okay. It's not really that exciting. So I mean, if you're looking at like a 12-team league with a corner man, everyone's drafting a first baseman early. They're cornermen. They're taking cornermen. Then you have utility guys that people are drafting. Like first baseman's dried up, and this is we're not even at number 20 yet on my list, and a lot of these guys are only we're talking about like like a Luis Arraez, for instance. He doesn't even have first base eligibility. He's a second baseman in a lot of leagues. It's just because of Yahoo he has first base eligibility. So yeah, it gets a little bit wonky here. I mean, there's guys that in deeper leagues maybe you could draft like a Yandy Diaz. I could see in like a 15-team league as a corner man. Okay, I mean, he is what he is. I don't think like I took him down. Like he hit 22 homers last year. I have him projected for 18. So I took him down a little bit. I think there's potentially even come down even more. And there's no speed, like I said. So it's like that's fine in a 15-team league for a corner man, but that in a shout like in a 12-team league, you might grow bored of that. And we're not that deep into first baseman.
No, we're not, and really from here on out, first base kind of falls in one of three buckets. It's like there's high average guys, there's the power and low average guys, and then there's the are they going to actually provide enough on a day-to-day basis that I'm not going to get bored of them and drop them at some point, guys? Like
Right.
that's the three buckets we have left. Like it just depends on whether you pick the guy who scores a bunch of runs at RBIs or has the high average, or like that's what's gonna set this difference apart at some point.
Right.
So like you kind of need to have maybe a corner infielder in mind with your team build at some point if you're gonna wait.
Right.
Moving on to number 20, which is Spencer Torkelson. He falls into the power low average bucket, Gray. 31 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 88, 94, and a 233 average. You have him projected for 34 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 84, 97, and 238. I mean, there's some chance that he takes the next step forward and figures out the average part. But again, I think this is a pretty clear power low average side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if honestly, I'm not sure if people are that excited about him because I was about to say I think people are more excited about him than I am. I don't know if they are, to be honest. Maybe. But yeah, I guess probably because my own perception, because going into the rankings and the projections, when I first started looking at him, before I looked at any stats, I expected to be more excited for him, and I was just like, nah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think like he looks to me like Rhys Hoskins, which is fine. I mean, but That means basically a lot of fly balls, and his average can really bottom out. It could also mean a lot of power, like he could hit potentially, I guess, 40 homers. But I don't trust the average completely. With I think his average could really like bottom out badly. And if the average bottoms out like to 215, say, then other things could happen. Like like he can get dropped in the order. He could get dropped to waivers in your fantasy league. He may not hit for power because he's struggling to hit for average. Like, other things could potentially hurt his fantasy value if he hits for such a low average. Counting stats come down, runs and RBIs, that is. So yeah, I don't know. I was a little bit more excited about him before I actually really dug in and looked at his numbers. And also, I don't really like I'm not a huge fan of the Tigers. Well, the stadium's a mess, but also just the lineup. Like I like the top ish of the Tigers lineup. Like I'm not gonna like I do like Riley Green, but yeah, I mean it's not the best of lineups for turning it over. And last year, he had a ton of 606 at bats to hit 31 homers. I mean, it's fine. I think I'm mostly concerned about the fly ball rate. Like he hits a lot of fly balls.
Yeah, he does definitely. 46.8% is a considerable amount. And that's definitely an issue with him. I'm quite a bit more optimistic on him. I don't know that the average is going to come up a ton, but I do think there's still room for it to improve as hard as he hits the ball, lower the launch angle a little bit, and some of those will figure themselves out. And I just he's still only 23, so or that was his age 23 season. So I do believe there's still some development that can happen here where, he 230 is not necessarily ingrained on him for forever. He can definitely figure some things out. Moving on to number 21 is Nathaniel Lowe. Last year he had 17 home runs, one stolen base, 89, 82, and hit 262. You have him projected for 22 home runs, two stolen bases, 86, 93, and a 270 average. And, Lowe has looked like he's breaking out a few times and then always kind of falls back to what he was. Are we going to get a full breakout at any time, Gray?
No, yeah, I mean maybe. I don't know.
Thanks for
Yeah,
that. Very clear answer.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, maybe.
No, maybe. He actually, I mean, yeah, he looked like like he should like try and forget whatever happened last year and go back and revert back to 2022 when it looked like he was breaking out. I mean, there wasn't a ton. Like his BABIP was a little bit higher in 2022. I don't know. I almost wonder if he was nursing something like an injury or something last year because like his numbers don't necessarily scream like he should have had that terrible of a year, but he did have a pretty bad year. My biggest concern I think with him is like he's sort of the opposite of Torkelson. He doesn't hit any fly balls, hits a ton of ground balls. So yeah, it's kind of hard to hit homers if you're hitting a lot of ground balls. His launch angle is pretty low, um, but bump. I think him and Yandy are sort of similar, and maybe I think Yandy probably has a higher floor for average. So yeah, he's okay. Like I said, the first baseman, they dried up a bit, and Lowe's no different in that respect. Like from Yandy on, there's not a ton of excitement here, at least as far as I was concerned. But Lowe is, I think, I have him for 22 homers, 270 average, no speed. It sounds, I mean, relatively, I mean, to me, that sounds okay for a corner man in a deep league, assuming a decent enough lineup spot in a good lineup. So you get good counting stats. So it's fine for a corner man in like a 15-team league. I think in a 12-team league, you're going to be. I think you're going to be a little bit bored.
Yeah, the home run to fly ball just kind of bottomed out last year. I'm assuming that can at least bounce back some. Hopefully, he can get to I would hope at least low 20s home runs. I don't know that I'm expecting him to get back into the high 20s like he did in 22, but I think your 22 home runs is right around where I would have him, and he's in a good lineup, so the counting numbers should be there for the most part. He's fine. He falls into the boring middle bucket that you're probably going to want to drop at different points in the season. Vinnie Pasquantino starts our next tier. 61 games last year, 9 home runs, 24, 26, and hit 247. You have him projected for 26 home runs, 2 stolen bases, 71, 84, and 261. This is another boring fall in the middle. You may want to drop him at different points in the season. Why?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if like the injury, like if I'm remembering correctly, I was a big fan for going into last year, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's like that stuff. Like I think his, missing a year. I think I'm out for at least for this year. I don't know. It depends on how he looks this year, but because even his upside. Well, I mean, maybe he gets into more power and more average, but at least as far as the projections go, he's pretty boring. Even if he were to reach his projections, it's very boring. And I think the downside is much more worrisome because of last year, because of missing all of last year with the injury and everything. So I think I like the idea of him more than I like him. I like the I like the stereotypical Italian that I think of when I think of him, but I don't know if I could draft based off of that.
Oh, that's fair. I feel like he does kind of get drafted on name value or name just the name, getting have it on your team sometimes a little bit ahead of where he should. I think I'd have to go back and make sure last year, but I'm pretty sure that was what I said going into last season was just he's fine. I think like the upside is pretty boring. I don't think the downside is maybe as bad as maybe what you think, just because he has such a good eye. He doesn't strike out. Like I don't really see the average bottoming out. So if anything, it's just a boring average with nothing else really type of guy. And we've already talked about a couple of those guys. So you could do worse than taking him here, after we've already talked about a couple of them.
Yeah,
Just because we're
yeah. I
more
mean,
interested.
he is young, so I mean, I guess there's potential here. I was just looking at his career because in his career he has 133 career games, and he's hit 19 homers and 272. And it's a terrible park. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not,
I
I'm not really super excited about it. I wish I could be because hey, it's Vinny Pasquantino. That interests me more than his actual reality.
Yeah, and anytime there's a shoulder injury, I mean, we've seen it sap power from so many guys that he didn't have a lot of extra power to lose to begin with. Number
Yeah.
23, Heimer Candelario, 22 home runs last year, 8 stolen bases, 77, 70, and 251. You have projected for 24 home runs, 8 stolen bases, 79, 90, and 243. I mean, a man who is single-handedly ruining our dream of owning 1 through 9 in the Reds lineup and being very excited about it,
You know
Gray.
what's funny? You know what's funny about our dream of the Reds lineup is like it's gonna go on until like the day before the season starts, and at that point I'm gonna be like, oh, I gotta finally change my projections for
Projection for
Triston
somebody.
Casas-Strand. After everyone's already drafted, everyone's
Drop
drafted.
India.
People are, yeah, it's like
Bottom him out, Gray. That's what I'm doing. I'm just convinced myself now as we're talking. I'm just gonna bottom India out and make everything else okay still.
No, I'm even more delusional, which we'll talk about in my second baseman rankings, because I actually have India getting 500 bats too, and just on a different team. I've already galaxy brained India to another team.
Oh yeah. You're just like he's not here.
I've already put him on like the Red Sox or something. Somehow I've figured out another team that needs Jonathan India where he's going to be great. I not only like Encarnacion-Strand, but I also like Jonathan India. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so Heimer Candelario. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think he actually does get every day at bats because they went out and signed him. So I'm assuming he gets every day at bats. But even with every day at bats, Heimer Candelario, super boring. I mean, these guys. I'll say this for this tier, or actually, this is a new tier. But from like Yandy on, from what we've discussed, from Yandy at least, Yandy to Heimer, they're fine for deeper leagues. Heimer Candelario, I don't know, in like a 15-team league where you're getting like whatchamacallit, his counting stats, he's in a good he should be in a good place in the Reds lineup. It's a good park. He doesn't have big power. I boosted his power from last year a little bit because of the park being so good. So I gave him 24 homers. And that, honestly, that's even optimistic. 24 homers would be his career high. So yeah, I mean, he's Heimer Candelario. He's probably in the 20 to 25 homer, 245-ish range, 245 to 255 average, a handful of steals. I don't know. I mean, if you squint hard enough, you can see Vlad Jr. No, you shouldn't see Vlad Jr. there.
That's what we're doing now. We're just gonna compare each podcast. We're just gonna pick one player to just bombard with criticism about what their line looks like, even though we still have them ranked as like a top 5, 6 player at the position. We're still gonna bombard them with just rudeness. Candelario, it's good that not everybody in the Reds lineup can be a top 5 pick, Gray. Otherwise, I can't own them all. So, Candelario at least gives me a later guy to target for the lineup. I grabbed him and like Friedel late, and it's still okay. Number 24 is Ryan Mountcastle. The 18 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 64, 68, and hit 270 last year. Young projected for 24 home runs, 4 stolen bases, 63, 72, and a 267 average. I've always liked Ryan Mountcastle. I hate what the ballpark has done to him.
Yeah. I mean, that's his big flaw. I would be really excited about him if he got traded. Him or Santander, trade someone and get an arm.
Free righty in Baltimore. Please just trade them.
Yeah. I mean, I love. Yeah, I mean, Mountcastle. The ball was a little bit bouncy in 2021, but they also Camden's Park was better in 2021, and you see his Mountcastle hit 33 homers that year. I think, and then he's gone down dramatically since. So he went from
better hitter. It's like
yeah. That's what I was essentially. That's what I was gonna say. He's become a better hitter, but his power's gone down because the park's so bad. So yeah, I mean, I think Mountcastle. Honestly, if Mountcastle could probably be up by like Christian Walker in a different park. Like he's really interesting if he's in a different park, but he's not. And I haven't been able to galaxy brain myself into thinking Mountcastle's getting traded. So yeah, he at this point he's basically Heimer Candelario with a little bit better average, a little bit less speed. in more of a situation where I could see a potential even platoon happening, because he got platooned last year, so a little bit at least, which would really hurt his. It hurt his value last year, Mountcastle, that is. So it could really hurt his value again. They don't really have a guy there to platoon necessarily. So we'll assume he doesn't get platooned that badly. But yeah, I don't know. Mountcastle is actually a guy who I was super excited about a couple years ago, who I've really cooled a lot on. So yeah, he's all right.
Yeah, I've acknowledged what he is while still loving him. I really want him to get moved out of Baltimore because I do believe in a different park he could be just a phenomenal fantasy player for us. And like you said, like Christian Walker feels in the right area. Like they hit the ball very similarly in regards to their profiles. So I would love to see that, but until that happens, yep, it is. It's not all that exciting until it happens for Mountcastle. Unfortunately, a guy that I tried to initially bury when I started making rankings, and he kept just moving up and up because depending on the league you're in, he plays everywhere, and like he's fine. He produces a little bit of everything for you, and that is Brandon Drury. He definitely falls in that category of the middle of a whole bunch of little bit of things. 26 home runs last year, 61.83, and a 262 average. You have him down for 24 home runs, one stolen base, 58.64, and a 257 average. It's hard to get excited about anybody on the Angels, and especially when it's Brandon Drury, who hasn't been exciting for us for very much. But like every time I look at Brandon Drury, I'm like, he's better than I thought he was, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brandon Drury is actually one of those guys where I think his best attribute is the fact that the Angels haven't gotten better, so there's no reason to move him out of the middle of the lineup. So I could see him, being valuable just because he's out there for 135, 40 games and in the middle of the lineup, so he's just going to get runs and RBIs and the occasional homer. He's really not exciting. He's really boring. He's basically Vinnie Pasquantino without the cool, hey, yo, I'm Vinnie Pasquantino.
He's basically Vlad Jr., right? Like,
yeah, he's Vlad Jr.
26 home runs, 262 average, like, sit in the middle of a lineup.
Brandon Drury is Vlad Guerrero Jr. that's the point where people shut off the podcast. That's the point where people are like, okay, now you've done it.
And one too many people to Vlad Jr. and nobody can take it anymore.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on.
We are moving on then. Number 26 is Justin Turner. He's currently a free agent as we're recording this. I mean, he's old. But he had a very solid back-to-back seasons now. He is old man Justin Turner. We'll see where he ends up.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I don't know. Like I'm half expecting him just to be like, I've retired, goodbye, and then the other half of me, I'm kind of saying like if he resigns anywhere, or not resigns, but if he signs anywhere, I don't see how he's any different than Brandon Drury. I mean, he's basically the same. Like we said, Brandon Drury is 24 homers, 260. How is Justin Turner not essentially pretty much that? Maybe a little bit less power, but a little bit better average. I don't know. I mean, I think he'll probably sign, so I think it's probably okay of a draft pick. But yeah, I would be a little bit worried about signing him. About drafting him, and hearing, in March, like he's like, nah, I'm just gonna retire. This free agency's stupid. I'm retiring.
That was basically the point I was circling around to. Was yeah, he's really old and he may retire, or again, he's old, so we'll see what happens there. I say he's old as he is all of, like, I don't know, probably like 6 months older than I am. So
But it's also, I mean, he declined a player like he declined a $13 million player option. So I don't think, like, I think he probably expected free agency to work a little bit different than it has this offseason, which is like Ohtani and nothing else. So I'm assuming he's gonna play. I should say, like I said, I was half expecting to retire, but I mean, I'm assuming he's gonna play somewhere because he did turn down an offer of 13 million. So I mean, he's probably assuming he's gonna play. So I would guess he is.
yeah, I don't know where that's going to be. I definitely don't think he's heading back to Boston. So we'll see where he lands. Moving on to number 27 is Rhys Hoskins, another free agent. This is, he falls into the power only bucket, Gray, and you know what you're getting, Rhys Hoskins. A little bit of a bad season last year where he was injured, and you know, I guess,
Yeah.
yeah, he didn't play last year, so that qualifies as a bad season.
Yeah, that's not a great season if you're not playing. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of expecting him to. I was, all these I mean, I'm honestly, on a side note, the free agency's been so stupid this off season. So, I mean, the fact that Rhys Hoskins hasn't signed yet, so goofy. I mean, he's a totally fine player for, at least 25 of 30 teams should be happy to have Rhys Hoskins. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where he's going to go. I mean, there's a lot of teams out there that don't have great DHs that could be helped with Rhys Hoskins. But I don't work for Scott Boris's company, so it's not my job to sell you on him. I think he's probably in a neutral park where, if you're assuming he lands somewhere decent where he has an everyday job and it's a neutral park, he's probably a 30 homer guy with a bad average. It's fine. It's it's Vlad Jr. minus some average. It's it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next guy, just Rhys Hoskins. We'll figure out where he lands, but he's a power guy. Number 28 is Josh Bell. Last year he had 20 home runs, 274, 247. He was projected for 22 home runs, 68, 79, and a 249 average. I feel like Josh Bell was like a month away from not being in Major League Baseball, and he just like finds his way to a new team, has a good couple months, and then everybody's like, "Yeah, it's Josh Bell. He's Josh Bell again."
Yeah, what was it Nathaniel Lowe that I was saying had hit a lot of ground balls? That I'll take whatever I said about whoever about earlier about ground balls. Put that on Josh Bell. That's Josh Bell's label. Whatever, I don't know, like that sort of, honestly too, his launch angle. Josh Bell, if you've ever seen him, he has one of the weirdest swings. Like he has an upper cut swing, but he hits so many ground balls. Like it's almost like shocking how many ground balls he hits, considering his swing is pretty uppercut. Last year his launch angle is what, almost 10, and he had like almost 50% ground balls. It's not good. It's not a good profile. So yeah, I think, Josh Bell at this point, he is what he is. He's a 20-ish homer guy who's going to hit 250. So it is.
Or get cut.
Yeah, or get cut. Yeah, or probably get traded in July and end up in a weird platoon or something.
Yeah, that sounds very appropriate for how Josh Bell would go. Moving on to number 29, Andrew Vaughn, 21 home runs, no stolen bases, 67, 80, 258. You him down for 20 home runs, one stolen base, 68, 72, 60, 265. I keep waiting for Andrew Vaughn to happen, but it's feeling more and more like fetch, and it's never going to happen.
Yeah, that is actually with. I feel like in that respect, he's like Ryan Mountcastle. It's this tier actually is filled with guys who at one point, I even at one point had hope for Heimer Candelario. This is a tier of like failed expectations. Andrew Vaughn, I as well thought he was going to be something at some point, but yeah, he has not. It has not materialized. Um, Even Steamer's projections are. I don't know where Steamer's coming up with. Like yeah, somehow Andrew Vaughn's getting power from somewhere. I wish that was true. It's so interesting when you look at like projections enough and you see things and you're like, I don't like it's like certain guys like they'll see like we mentioned earlier with Steer, it's like, oh yeah, his speed's he's gonna get slower even though he's so young. And then you see Vaughn, it's like, oh yeah, he's gonna hit a lot more power, even though he's shown no power whatsoever at any point. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, Andrew Vaughn has the good fortune, I guess, if you could say it, to be in a terrible lineup and will play probably every day. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like another guy who's in that terrible lineup who plays every day is Andrew Benintendi. Andrew Vaughn, I won't put on him comparing him to Benintendi, but it's not that far off. It's not that different.
I think Vaughn hits the ball a good amount harder than Benintendi. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, results speak for themselves in the end. So it is what it is. I do like Vaughn as a, if you missed out on corner infield and you're just trying to find some guys with some upside, I'd rather Vaughn than some of these boring guys we've talked about before. Like I'll take him over Josh Bell. I know Josh Bell's line is probably is consistent or more consistent, maybe. I don't even know if that's even true. But like, I'll take the upside that Vaughn figures something out or can get the hell out of Chicago some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Chris Bryant comes in at 30, 80 games last year. He hit 233, 10 home runs, 36, 31, and 233. You're projected for 17 home runs, two stolen bases, 56, 67, and a 258 average. Chris Bryant is, the winning player rater. He was one, and at least at one point, he was Mr. Player Rater, and now he's just Mr. Injury List.
Yeah, I think whoever sold their soul, I guess, for the championship with the Chicago Cubs. I hope they consulted with Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and Javier Baez and so many of those guys because those guys really did not age very well.
Yeah,
Over there.
really bad for them in their $150 million each contracts. Really,
Yeah.
really
Yeah, I know.
terrible that they came out of that with huge, massive 8 to 10 year deals each. Sorry, guys. Really bad that we put that on you as Cubs. Also, really glad as I predicted that the Cubs did not sign them all because you kind of saw all this coming.
Yeah, yeah, no, I can't argue with any of that. I think with Chris Bryant, like you look at like it's almost like you're playing chicken with how few games you can project him for. It's like he played 42 and then 80. Can I project him for 100 games? Is that possible? It's almost like it's like name that tune, but with projections and at bats for Chris Bryant. I don't know, man. Like I think if he were to get 450, 500 at bats, he might not be that awful, but I don't know if you can really project him for honest. Like I project him for 405 at bats. That honestly even feels optimistic. I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked to see him. I mean, God, man, the Rockies are so terrible. You remember when the Rockies were a good team, and
Oh,
and then even better at home. They at one point they were. I know people are hearing this and they're thinking, no, the Rockies were never good. It's like, yeah, the Rockies were good, and then they were even better at home. Now they're like terrible and hold your nose, and they can be sort of okay at home, aside from Nolan Jones, obviously. But yeah, I think Chris Bryant probably he's only really good if he's healthy. And man, has he not been healthy? Like he's not been healthy at all. So yeah, I don't know. This is bad. This is bad.
yeah. Even when he's on the field, he's not healthy. That's part of the problem. Is like even the numbers we're getting aren't what a healthy Chris Bryant. I even at 32 years old, I still believe he would give you better numbers if he would just stay healthy. But he's even when he's playing, he's not. So it is what it is. I mean, again, it's an upside play, definitely in the shallower leagues. No problem with going like a Vaughn or a Chris Bryant. If you're in a deep drafted hold, maybe if you've already got those positions locked down, you go with somebody a little safer. But it kind of depends on what you're looking for and in your type of leagues. Ray, we've gone plenty long here already. We've gone through 30. The podcast is technically the top 20, so we gave 10 already extra. Let's just name a couple of guys from here on out that maybe you're targeting in deeper leagues at corner, infield, or as backups for your reserves.
Okay, sure. So I'm not a guy who normally drafts a player like a Nolan Chanel, like a purse. What is that? Is that his name? I'm not really a guy who usually drafts a guy like Nolan Chanel. But you know what I'm talking about. But because he doesn't have really good speed, he doesn't have like any loud tools. He's not really like he's kind of like Ty France, if you know who that is. He's a not huge power, no speed guy, but he has a little bit of upside in his average, and he should play every day because, as we've mentioned with the Angels, they are not playing for this year, so they should play him every day. As of right now, I wouldn't be shocked to see him hitting third. I mean, right now it's between him and like Drury and maybe Ward and Trout, but none of them can really stay on the field. So yeah, I mean, there's maybe for like a deeper league for a corner man, if you've punted corner man a little bit in a deeper league, it's not a terrible gamble. I could see it. Another guy who is really similar in that respect, who's got almost an identical profile, is Joey Menez in Washington. He also should play every day in the heart of the lineup. And again, he doesn't have real speed and he might only hit 15 homers. So there's not a lot there. And it's not the kind of guy I usually draft. But if you're in a deep enough league, you could there's value in that if you can get him for like he's going at like 450 overall. Like he's going so late. Menez, that is. He's going really like so late. Like he's going, I think, a good 200 picks later than where like Rudy's projections have him. Like I think Rudy's projections have him at like 250 overall, and he's going at like 450 overall. So incredible value if you can handle that type of player. Like he's not gonna. I don't think there's any upside there. He's not going to really blow you away, but he should be valuable, more valuable than where his draft spot is. So there's two guys. I don't know who you got.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's hitting in the middle of the lineup when you get down to this area is somebody who can be helpful. With that in mind, Jose Abreu, I think we can finally give up on the power ever returning, but he is still sitting in the middle of a lineup for now. We talked about failed prospects and injury guys. There is no, bigger failed prospect. No, I guess that's not fair, but for me, one of my all-time prospect loves is
Oh my
Alex
God,
Kirilloff.
Kirilov. Oh
Love
my
him.
God,
Always
Alex
him.
Kirilov.
No
How
way.
do we not talk about Alex Kirilov?
So, I mean, anytime we have a first base podcast, this could be 5 years from now. Barring him being in Korea or Japan playing, I'm still going to be talking about him. In that vein, if you're looking at guys that are a little more upsidey, Kyle Manzardo could get a job, and that would be interesting. Cedar Crone's still a free agent, so that could be interesting if he lands somewhere. And then on the prospect side, Matt Mervis, Kobe Mayo, Visión de los Santos, Jakinski Noel, all could be looking at potential jobs if things work out well for them in spring training, or just down the line a little bit into the season for those deeper leagues.
Word.
So there's a lot. If you want, you can always go look at Gray's article on first baseman. I believe he goes all the way out to 60, or maybe even a little bit past 60. If you're looking for more information in regards to first baseman, it is a lot of those three buckets we kept talking about. And eventually it gets down to just the really, really boring bucket. But that's our first base podcast. If you have any questions for us, you can always find us on Twitter. I'm at RazBeaton. Gray is, of course, the owner of the at Razzball account. We are taking submissions for anybody who wants to be in either of the podcast leagues. If you want, you can always find us on youtube.com/Razzball Fantasy in the comment section there, on Razzball.com underneath the articles in that comment section, or wherever else. You can always just find us wherever. We're all over the place. Gray, nice job. Talk to you later. Enjoy your trip.